My name is Andrius Hofmann-Lagunavicious, and I am a MA in modern culture, and I also study information science and IT here at the University of Copenhagen. And this study is actually a work in progress. It was supposed to be a PhD proposal. So, yeah. So first of all, the video game market revenue worldwide. So in 2019, the year took interest in researching the video game industry. The global game market revenue was $265.2 billion. In the closure of the market year of 2023, the revenue was at $406.2 billion US dollars. And the market forecast shows increasing revenues in the years to come. By 2026, the forecast in revenue is set to be $542.4 billion US dollars. That means that in 7 years, the video game industry will double in size. A lot of numbers here. In comparison with the movie industry's revenue of 98 billion US dollars and the music industry global revenues with 48 billion US dollars, both including streaming services, the video industry is bigger than the movie and music industries combined. With the 3.2 billion gamers worldwide, it can be said that the video game industry is the largest industry in the entertainment sector. And with its productions, video games, which are residing in the realm of popular culture and increasingly in discussions of the art sector, the video game industry can be viewed as having a cultural impact. So my approach is a twofold analysis. I will take a quantitative approach and make a bibliometric analysis of the state of research about video games. This is in the realm of information science. And so this, I would use Scopus, one of the largest bibliographic databases, to collect data and visualize the findings. And secondly, I will take a qualitative approach and due to time limit show some examples of video games that can be said to have a cultural content. And to this, I employ critical discourse analysis as method. So for me to make a bibliometric analysis, I use Scopus, as I told before, and I put in title, abs, this is an abstract, and keywords. And this, what I used was the video game or video game, so it's just with a space. And it gave me 36,000 documents in Scopus. And there are some noise, of course, because the video games might be named in some, fluctuous way in some of the documents. So this is the graph showing the time span here, the years, and the number of documents by year. And you can see that it is the interest and increased output of the documents are growing. And this is 2024, so it shows a little a little dive, but the year is not over, so it might be just getting more outputs. And this is documents by year by source, and we can see which journals are the biggest ones. That's a very great way to see, where the output, the most productive output comes from. And I think this is very interesting because here we can see by percent in which areas, subject areas, the outputs are coming from. So the largest is the computer science, obviously. Then we have social sciences, which kind of took me by surprise because I thought it wouldn't have as much output as the computer science and business management. But there we go. Medicine, psychology, engineering, and arts and humanities with 7.3%. And here we see the documents by type, and 53% of it are articles, and then there are some conference papers, book chapters, and so on. And we can see it through documents by affiliation, which universities have the largest input by year. And here I go to look at the humanities, so the 7.3% of the total output, which means there are 4,649 documents. And again, I don't know why, but it took the analysis to 2027, but it cannot predict this, so it will probably just have the same curve as the other one. And we can see that these are the journals that are the most productive. The Journal of Sound and Music and Games, Computers and Human Behavior, Convergence, Game Studies, and Games and Culture. These are the documents by territory. United States outputs the most, then the United Kingdom, Spain, Canada, Australia, and so on. And documents by author. The most productive authors are Griffiths, Summers, Ferguson, and so on. And if I make a search called video game and occult or occulture or esotericism or esoteric, it finds 56 documents. And we can see that it has some spikes here, and of course, again, 2025, we cannot predict, but it seems that there are a curve that is going upwards also. So there is an increase in interest in the video games. And we have this document by author and documents by country. Again, United States takes the cake, and then United Kingdom, Austria, Belgium, and so on. So this is, as I said, a quantitative analysis. So it doesn't say anything about the quality of those documents, but it shows that there is an increase in interest over time in the study of video games and the occult or esoteric. So how do we approach video games and the study of religion? And I'll do that in terms of modern culture, and I took a course in Tim's study, Esotericism, and throughout philosophy and history, and he showed me this book, Religion and Consumer Society, and by Gautier and Martikin. And they wrote another book in 2020 called The Marketization of Religion. So, video games can be viewed as productions. They are produced, and most of them are commodities. That means they are part of the global market system, a network of production, circulation, and possibilities of consumption. But what about religion and spirituality? How can we situate them in the 21st century? So they have an answer to this. There has been a marketization of religion, according to Gautier and Martikin. This means that there is a relation between market and the market economy and the ideology of neoliberalism, here under its core forms of management, globalization, marketization, finance, capitalism, and religion. So religion is now in the marketplace on the same terms as other brands like Nike, Apple, selling meaning for the construction of identities in a consumerist society. This means that the traditional religious institutions have and are going through transformations. Gautier and Martikin do not insert a normative claim about the relation of religion and consumerism. On the contrary, they state not that consumerism is good or bad, but rather that it is here and now, and allowing us to see the world of religions through those lenses clarifies many discussions on contemporary religious change. And on these terms, we can say that religion appears in the market economy, also in the video game industry. So the notion of occulture, that the occult is post-industrial societies, is ordinary, ingrained in our cultural production and consumption, is a helpful approach to engage with the video game industry. As we will see in some examples, the video game industry can, in this context, be seen as, among other things, a producer of occulture. The concept that I'm using of occulture is coined by Christopher Partridge, and he writes, "The late modern period since the 60s has witnessed the emergence of a political and cultural context that has proved particularly conducive to the proliferation of broadly esoteric ideas. Indeed, no longer can such thought be considered cultured or esoteric in the sense of being recondite and secretive. While there are, of course, occult traditions and organizations that are styled as such, concerned with the cultivation of a sense of Gnostic privilege, The culture in which they are embedded is no longer hidden or unfamiliar. It is ordinary and everyday. The well-documented shift from religion to spirituality, the turn to the self, the change of focus from external authority to inner experience has significantly increased the appeal and respectability of esotericism. And with inspiration from Raymond Williams' dictum that cultures as a whole way of life, Partridge argues that the same goes for the notion of occulture. Occulture is ordinary, and at the same time, it is a process for discovery and creativity, with examples from esoteric and paranormal phenomena and popular culture, from Black Sabbath to Led Zeppelin, from Twin Peaks and X-Files to Harry Potter and Game of Thrones. Partridge makes a convincing argument, I think. So, I'm using critical discourse analysis, and this is the Danish version and the English version from Norman Fairclough. I like the Danish version better because it shows a way of progression, but I think I also would show you for the English-speaking the version of this. So the production of themes and phenomena related to occulture and video games analyzed in various ways. I think that critical discourse analysis by Norman Fairclough could give us some insights on ideally those three levels. Fairclough uses discourse in multiple ways. In a broad and abstract sense, discourse can be understood as language use and social praxis. And in a narrow and technical sense, discourse gives meaning to experience from certain perspectives. And without going too deep into the discussions about the epistemological and methodological implications of using critical discourse analysis as method, we can say that discourse can be isolated to semiotic systems, that is, language and images. And of course, this means that video games can be analyzed as a text and a discursive event on the first level, and then we can make interpretations and look at other interpretations as part of a social praxis of discourse formations and the discourse order, which means that there is a hegemony of discourses, and the way they can be changed is by looking at the content of the text and see if the text uses a lot of different discourses, which means that it wants to change the discourse order. So here comes the first example, Dark Souls and Elden Ring. And I want to discuss these games, and Elden Ring is, by the way, based on Dark Souls, so that's why I use these two games. And they're developed by From Software and published by Bandai Namco. The games are known for their high difficulty and is often cited by gaming magazines such as Game Radar as some of the greatest games of all time. From a genre-specific point of view, Dark Souls can be said to be an action role-play game set in a dark fantasy world in the fictitious kingdom of Lordaeron. The main characters are played in the third-person perspective. And the playable character, which is customizable, takes the role as a cursed human who sets out to discover the fate of other cursed humans. The game is designed to make the player explore interconnected environments based on dialogue with non-playable characters, NPCs, and fighting enemies such as knights, demons, phantoms, dragons, monsters, and other supernatural entities with weapons or magic. The story is not told like mostly other games. It is told unorthodoxly through environmental details, dialogues with NPCs, and in-game text, which demands the player to puzzle the storyline as the player progresses. And one of the occulture-related aspects of the games are the weapons, magic, and healing systems. These systems have elements that can be viewed and analyzed through the alchemy of Paracelsus. The transformations of the three main principles of constitution, the fluid mercury, the solid salts, and the combustible sulfur are some of the main traits of Paracelsus alchemy. And in Dark Souls, you can combine these different objects to make a transformative process. And of course, there are also some of the Mercury and Mercurius images in the video game, also on gates and on shields, kind of stuff. And then there is magic. Magic is another big element in the games. It takes different forms, such as sorceries and faith, pyromancies, and miracles. And according to Arthur Wesley's, magic has to do with power over others, or over nature. Often the magician seeks to command. And we also see that in the Agamben ontology. The investigation of the command, Agamben finds the relation between language and ontology as a split in what he calls Western ontology as bipolar machine. He writes, "There are in Western culture two ontologies, distinct but unrelated. The first, the ontology of the apophantic assertion, is expressed essentially in the indicative. The second, the ontology of the command, is expressed essentially in the imperative. According to Agamben, it is the work of Aristotle that has excluded the non-apophantic discourses from philosophy and logic. On the one hand, the relation between language and ontology is apophantic, which has the grammatical function of indicative. This gives a descriptive relation to ontology. Apophantic propositions can be true or false. Therefore, they describe the relation between language and the world. On the other hand, the non-apophantic discourses, the grammatical functions of the imperative, they do not describe the relation between language and world, but commands it." As Agamben writes, "To this linguistic partition, there corresponds the partition of the real into two correlated but distinct spheres. The first ontology, in fact, defines and governs the sphere of philosophy and science. The second, that of law, religion, and magic. Law, religion, and magic, which originally is not always easy to distinguish, constitute, in fact, a sphere in which language is always in the imperative," he writes. So these thoughts can be seen in relation to Dark Souls and Elden Rings, but also in other video games such as Skies of Arcadia, where the magic attacks and the summons of forces are uttered in imperative mode. As an example, moonstones give me strength. But of course, the magic is not only uttered in words, but in a form of command, but also has an aesthetic visual dimension, which we can see here, and which could be worth a study of its own right, because games such as World of Warcraft, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, and other types of video games uses similar aesthetics to express magic and summons of magic. There are other interpretations. Now we are in the second and the third rocket of the discourse analysis. There's a fair amount of interpretations of text and videos about the lore of Dark Souls. And one of the key points of consensus, besides that the game is very hard and the player will die a lot, is that the game has occult content. These cultural key points are even discussed in some fan videos that has hundreds of thousands of views, like the Dark Souls and the Occult, which today has 169,000 views. So there is a discussion in the discourse order. There is a change in the way that occulture and the occult is perceived by people in popular culture and, in fact, in the video games, I would say. And the next example, if we have time for it, is Gone Home, a game that is developed by Fulbright and is an indie game. The game is set in 1995 and centers around a young woman who returns to rural Oregon from a trip to Europe, finding her family residence empty. The story and gameplay is built upon exploration, and the main character, Katie, 21 years, has to piece together what has happened by examining objects such as journals, letters, books, phone messages, and etc. left around in the empty house. The game reveals that Katie's 70-year-old sister, Sam, has developed a romantic relationship with a girl named Lonnie, a US Army cadet she met at a punk rock concert. They bonded over video games, namely Street Fighter, punk rock, grunge, and a real-life underground 90s feminist punk movement called Riot Girl. On the way to her station, Lonnie calls Sam from a payphone in Salem, and she wanted them to be together. Sam left the house to start a new life with Lonnie outside of Oregon. The parents left a note that they went on a vacation, but soon Katie finds out that they went away for family counseling. The plot is about how a US nuclear family struggles to deal with homosexuality, family traumas, The game reveals that the father has been sexually abused by his uncle in '63. That's why he writes conspiracy and sci-fi books about the Kennedy assassination and time travels. And stories about hauntings. The house they live in is thought to be haunted by the same deceased uncle. Gone Home uses intertextuality in its discourse that can be analyzed as a hauntology of the 90s occulture. In that, the game shows objects such as recorded VHS tapes with X-Files labels on them. The I Want to Believe X-Files poster is to be found in one of the rooms. An occult and secret room under the stairs is to be found in the game, which contains a white-painted pentagram on a round wooden table with red candles on each spike, and some fictional occult books, namely Possession and Exorcism, interacting with the supernatural and recleansing unwanted spirits. In Sam's room, we find a poster with Laura Palmer from Twin Peaks by David Lynch. And older technologies also appear in the game, such as Laserdisc player that is hooked to a CRT television. The TV displays a weather forecast, reference to the ontological genre of analog horror. This ontological intertext of 90s occulture shows a relation between technology and memory. As the late Mark Fisher writes, ontology isn't about hokey atmospherics or spookiness, but a technological uncanny. And later he writes, ontology is exercised by the problem of memory and its imperfect recovery. In this form, Gone Home is an example of the technological uncanny. In certain images, spaces, and representations, we can feel haunted as we are made aware of the presence of what should be dead and buried. Reappearing, but now disembodied many years later by technical representation, i.e. the video game format. That represents, through an eerie atmosphere, the memory of the way the 90s occulture revealed itself. The invoked and imperfect recovery and memory, not to be confused with unforgetting. That is mediated through these old technologies, X-Files as seen through a re-recorded videotape, movies watched through a Laserdisc player, international weather services boards mediated through 90s computer-generated graphics, broadcasted in the fuzziness of the RCA output of a cathode rope tube television. All of this, of course, simulated in a digital environment and playable in the format of investigative video games designed to be mediated on a high-resolution HD flat-screen television. The hauntology of the 90s occulture in Gone Home has to do with what Derrida calls hauntology and spectrality. He writes, spectrality is at work everywhere and more than ever in an original way in the reproducible virtuality of photography and cinema. We can also add that this could be valid in video games. And somewhere else he writes, spectrality, far from being reduced by the rationality of modern technology, found itself, on the contrary, amplified. Every culture has its phantoms and the spectrality that is conditioned by its technology. Gone Home is a great example of how hauntology and spectrality is at play, and the game resists what Jameson and Fisher calls the nostalgia mode, and instead investigates the problems of exclusion in the nuclear family structure, the struggles of acceptance and family trauma, mediated through the lens of hauntology of 90s occulture. And Fisher writes, it is the very foregrounding of temporality that makes hauntology differ from the typical products of the nostalgia mode. It has to do with memories, but with a memory disorder. I think that some of the same points can be related to Gone Home. The title itself can be said to be somewhat a hauntological wordplay. In its grammatical function, Gone Home is a past participle of go home. Katie has gone home from her journey to Europe, but in hauntology, the vector has to do with something present in its absence. The vector pulls in two directions, the no longer and the not there yet. Gone Home has a hauntological ring to it. Katie is not coming home because her home is empty. It is no longer a home. The home is gone. A nuclear family that is no longer, but still haunts the presence through the arrangement of their objects and texts. And lastly, of course, there are a lot of other examples of occulture in video games. We have Golden Axe from '89, Castlevania, Diablo, Lust for Darkness, Phantasy Star, Echo the Dolphin, Darkside Detective, and World of Warcraft. And yeah, I think that will be the end for now. I have a lot more, but I think we have to stop now. Thank you.
can't see it, then you just never know it.